When they came to grab me, I didn't scream, I bit, until I tasted blood. Zoe's back at the bookshop, almost feeling normal, when 3 men appeared outside, and the trunk of their car opened like a grave. They reached for her. She threw an entire catalog shelf into the doorway, fought with everything she had, and bit the hand over her mouth until copper filled her tongue. Then Giorgio arrived, and the street went silent. Let's break this absolute madness down, all right? Picture our girl Lena, looking fragile in this stuck-up hotel lobby. All she wanted was to drop off an old book and dip back to her quiet life. But the universe has a sick sense of humor. Instead of a clean getaway, her totally toxic ex is standing right there. Panicking like crazy, she backs into an elevator, silently begging the massive dude inside to hide her. Enter Vittorio. The vibe completely shifts. Bro is not playing hero, he is a straight-up apex predator. His dead eyes lock onto the ex, already picking out a casket for the guy. The trap is officially set for a massive vendetta. It is a harsh reality check we all face. Sometimes the hand pulling you out of the fire is a much scarier monster claiming you for himself. The toxic ex totally chickens out, backing away because he can feel the silent, lethal boss energy Vittorio is giving off. Lena lets out this awkward, nervous little laugh, just desperately trying to break the suffocating tension. But Vittorio? Bro does not move a single muscle. The heavy brass doors slam shut, and his iron grip on her waist does not budge one bit. Later on, when she sees the hotel staff literally shaking in their boots just to speak to him, the freezing reality hits her. She just traded a loudmouth bully for a certified Mafia boss. Her brain basically short-circuits, flashing back to her super boring morning routine, where everything was perfectly timed. It shows us something painfully real about trauma. We obsess over controlling tiny details in our lives, purely to block out terrifying forces we know we cannot beat. Let's rewind and look at her morning for a second, because the contrast is wild. Lena anchors her whole life to the most boring routines ever. The old guy at the bakery, the smell of fresh bread, a cheap cup of coffee, these are her lifelines keeping the panic attacks away. She is always pushing these busted, taped-up glasses up her nose, a nasty souvenir from a brutal winter back in Philly. She rocks those broken frames like armor, basically broadcasting to the world that she is damaged goods and not worth the trouble. But here is the massive flaw in wearing your trauma on your sleeve. I crossed the street. When you spend years convincing yourself that you are totally worthless, you completely forget how to fight back the second a real terrifying predator steps out of the shadows and decides you are his. She literally calls her dump of an apartment a discreet palace.
In reality, it doesn't reach the fourth floor walk.
Up where the windows rattle and muffled piano. Music bleeds through the thin walls all day long. She romanticizes this sad little box just because it gives her the illusion of being safe. Nobody knows where she sleeps, and she likes it that way. She scurries across the gray city streets, ducking into a dusty, rare bookshop to deal with her boss, Madame Aureli. Lena has completely stripped her life of any human warmth, trading real relationships for cold, boring predictability. It hits us with a deeply heartbreaking lesson. Far too often, a wounded person will gladly lock themselves in a freezing, empty room, simply to avoid the terrifying risk of letting someone new break their heart all over again. Her boss is this super intimidating lady with sharp white hair, just another force casually walking all over our girl. She calls her Zoe, this fragile fake name Lena uses to cut ties with her messy past. Madame Aureli literally tosses a leather folder across the desk, openly roasting Lena and her quiet vibe. Lena just takes the hit, throwing back a totally hollow joke. Her self-worth basically vanished the day she went into hiding. The mission? Hand deliver this package to a crazy rich buyer at the Plaza Hotel. You can literally see the sheer panic wash over Lena. She gasps, her eyes going wide with absolute, unhinged terror. It is a stark reminder that deep trauma does not care about logic or reason. Sometimes, just hearing the name of a fancy building is enough to make a survivor feel like they are fighting for their very life. Just watch how fast her anxiety spirals into a total meltdown. To a broke girl barely surviving, a massive luxury hotel feels like an armed military base. Still, a tiny spark of stubborn pride kicks in, and she fakes a brave face, swearing she will get it done by lunch. Madame Aurali slaps some cab fare in her hand with a savage warning to eat something, saying a fancy place like that will chew a hungry girl up. Lena takes that nasty jab straight to the chest, but forces her mind away from the panic. Instead, she hyper-focuses on the soft velvet folder and her cheap white cotton gloves. It highlights a crazy powerful defense mechanism we all use. When we are genuinely terrified of the big picture, we obsess over the tiny tasks right in front of us, praying the busy work will drown out the roaring fear inside our heads. Notice how she gets completely obsessive, preparing for this basic delivery. She smooths out the old pages with manic energy, trapped in this tragic delusion that having a neat folder will somehow keep her safe from a toxic world. It is only when she is stuck in the back of the taxi that her buried memories start clawing their way out. Dark, twisted thoughts of Bastien, her old French fiancé, flood her brain. He is the literal monster she ran from, the whole reason she crossed an ocean. Growing up as a shady lawyer kid, Bastien got completely brainwashed by endless money and power, thinking he could just take whatever he wanted without paying a price. It is a chilling reminder about human darkness. True villains rarely wear scary masks. They usually just look like perfectly groomed guys who have never been told no in their entire lives. Bastien was an absolute masterclass in destroying a person and their mental health. Bro literally thrived on public humiliation, casually listing out her flaws while pouring expensive wine at fancy dinners. He broke her world down, piece by piece, checking her phone and systematically scaring off every friend she had. When she finally scraped together the guts to leave, he did not even yell. He just laughed, fully convinced she was a toy that belonged to him forever. The sick echo of that laugh forced her to sleep with the lights on for 10 solid years. The cab suddenly jerks to a stop at the plaza's massive stone steps. She shoves her busted glasses up, hugging the folder like it is a bulletproof vest, and walks blindly right into the trap. It is a bitter lesson about survival. Escaping your personal demons is never as easy as changing your zip code, stepping into that insanely rich lobby. Lena does not see luxury at all, she sees an active war zone. The shiny marble floors echo every single click of her cheap heels, making her feel wildly exposed, like a rabbit surrounded by wolves. The thick smell of expensive jasmine perfume literally makes her sick to her stomach. She is just praying to drop the package and vanish into thin air. But the second the stuck-up clerk tells her to wait, her whole reality shatters. Before she even turns her head, it hits her like a freight train, that deep, arrogant laugh echoing from the hallway. Bastien, her absolute worst nightmare, is standing right there, casually sipping a drink. It is a brutally cold reminder about how fate works. The universe honestly does not care about math or odds. When the time is right, your deepest fears will always track you down. Stick with me here, guys. You and I are about to witness absolute peak terror. Lena completely freezes up. She watches Bastien looking super chilled out, which honestly makes the violent panic attack exploding in her brain feel 10 times worse. This grand lobby suddenly warps, feeling like a tiny box that is crushing her. He is literally 20 meters away. If he turns his head even a fraction of an inch, it is game over. She silently begs the fancy floor to just swallow her whole. She stops breathing entirely, locked in that exact paralyzing freeze. A deer gets right before a truck hits it. The clerk is still yapping, but it is totally drowned out by the alarms screaming in her head. It proves a terrifying point about trauma. Sometimes the absolute worst, most inescapable prison in the world is just the space inside your own frozen body. Words mean absolutely nothing to her right now. Her brain flips this crazy primal survival switch, instantly turning her into a hunted animal, calculating an escape route. Her wild eyes scan the massive room for a hidden exit, quickly locking onto a dark hallway with 3 mirrored elevators. It is honestly heartbreaking. to see how perfectly abuse trains someone to possess in a split second. She mumbles a totally fake thank you to the clerk and just bolts. Every instinct is screaming at her to run for her life, but she knows sprinting will just trigger the predator to chase her down. She ducks into the furthest elevator, violently spamming the button, clutching her folder like it is a shield. Extreme fear has a twisted, tragic way of forging brilliant survival experts out of totally ordinary, everyday people. In her totally panicked mind, Bastian's toxic laugh is bouncing off the walls, creeping closer by the second. She is silently screaming at the elevator doors to hurry up and close. But these fancy luxury doors are designed to slide shut at a painfully slow, elegant pace. The delay is absolute torture. Hanging in that agonizing wait, her eyes suddenly catch a massive shadow in the mirror. A giant dude in a sharp dark suit is standing perfectly still right behind her. She was so hyper-focused on the monster out in the lobby that she completely missed the silent phantom stepping into the box with her. Her blood runs totally cold. The devil she knows is out there, but a massive plot twist is locked inside here. It is a chilling reminder for you and me. Sometimes the quiet unknown lurking right behind you is far deadlier than the loud threat you can see. Guys, picture this absolute chaos. Zoe's brain is completely glitching out, capturing this stranger in laggy snapshots. She spots a jawline sharp enough to cut glass and a watch worth more than a house. But the wildest part? The dude brings this insane, suffocating silence with him. Like boss music is about to drop. The elevator doors are just chilling wide open. After a decade of running on zero sleep and pure anxiety, she completely snaps. In total panic mode, she yeets herself backward right into this absolute unit of a man, knocking her precious folders everywhere. She's banking on making a massive public scene so her stalker, Bastian, won't drag her away. Honestly, there's a real lesson here. When you are pushed to absolute terror, you will trade every ounce of your logical thinking just for the slimmest chance at survival. The camera follows Zoe straight up sprinting down this creepy dark hallway. She is gasping for air right before she violently crashes into Giorgio. He is just standing there like a whole brick wall, and she uses him as a human meat shield to block Bastian. Running purely on fight or flight energy, she plants this clumsy, shaking kiss right on his jaw, just as the elevator doors start closing. She is fully expecting him to push her off like a weirdo. But nah, plot twist. His giant rough hand grabs her waist, locking down like a massive steel trap. You can hear the elevator click shut, and the horrible realization drops. You know what they say about bad decisions. Sometimes, in our desperate rush to run away from a starving wolf, we end up diving headfirst straight into the mouth of a waiting lion. Giorgio is completely unbothered here. He doesn't even blink. Instead of flinching, he just slides his arm around her, shaking shoulders, resting his chin against her head like they've been married for 20 years. He drops this smooth, super dark whisper in Italian. Zoe has zero clue what he's saying, but the vibe is crystal clear. It is that terrifying, quiet tone of a boss who hands out death sentences for breakfast. Out in the hallway, Bastian completely freezes. All that tough guy energy instantly leaves his body the second he makes eye contact with a real apex predator. It is crazy how true this is in real life. You can have all the loud, fake neighborhood bullies acting tough, but the actual monsters who run the world? They never have to yell. They always operate in total, absolute silence. Now we are stuck in this tiny elevator, and the tension is absolutely suffocating. Outside, Bastian throws his hands up in the most pathetic surrender ever. He slaps on this terrified smile, backing away from a guy who could clearly end his whole existence. The heavy doors slide shut with a nasty click. The stalker is gone, but the actual final boss is standing right next to her. Zoe is frozen solid, her heart basically doing backflips in her chest. The quiet is super heavy, smelling like expensive leather and sandalwood. She wanted a shield, but she locked herself in a cage. Honestly, it is a wild lesson for anyone trying to escape a bad spot. The exact same walls we build in a panic to keep out the bad guys, usually end up being the exact walls that trap us inside forever. The sheer stress of the situation completely breaks her brain. Trapped under those awful elevator lights, her nervous system just crashes. And she starts doing this frantic, breathless giggling. She is just babbling in like 3 different languages at once. It is the sound of someone whose soul is totally blue screening. When she finally gets the nerve to step back, she just hits a solid wall of custom wool and pure muscle. Giorgio doesn't squeeze her tighter. He doesn't do anything aggressive or messy. He just stands there, completely unmovable, giving off the terrifying energy of a dude who has already planned out her entire tragic future. Life teaches us this over and over. The most terrifying flex of absolute control is never someone yelling at you. It is always that quiet, unbreakable stillness. The room finally stops spinning, and she gets a good look at her captor. Her survival instincts kick into overdrive as she scans him. He looks to be in his 30s, built like a brick house, and has a faint scar that practically screams he has seen some crazy battles. His eyes are basically black holes with zero emotion. Then, she clocks the outfit. A crazy, expensive dark suit with a silk family crest on the cuff. She only notices this because his hand is still locked onto her hip like an iron claw. He asks for her name in perfect English, but the tone is totally empty of any human feeling. It really makes you think about how the world works. True darkness almost never looks like an ugly monster hiding under the bed. It usually shows up in a flawless suit, hiding its absolute devastation right in plain sight. Her voice shakes for a split second, but she manages to lock it down and just drops her first name. Zoe. When he just stands there waiting for her last name, she actually bites her tongue. It is such a tiny, completely useless attempt to rebel. But watch his body language here. It is wild. He just tilts his head. It looks polite, but really he is clinically calculating exactly how fast he can break her. Then, crazy slowly, he pulls his hand away from her waist. It is a massive flex of power, proving he is the only one deciding if she gets to breathe. The elevator dings, opening up to show a massive bodyguard and a hotel manager who is visibly shaking. It is a tough pill to swallow, honestly. Throwing out little acts of defiance feels good in the moment, but it means absolutely nothing when the game is fully rigged against you. The shot pulls back here, and you see the entire world basically bowing down to this guy. The hotel manager turns pale as a ghost, totally losing all the color in his face the second he spots the boss. He is stuttering through these sad apologies, his hands shaking like crazy as he drops the name, Don Castellaneta. Down the hall, a room service guy straight up ditches his cart and bolts for the fire exit. Even the fancy front desk worker smashes the silent alarm. The massive wave of pure dread coming off these normal people is what finally snaps Zoe out of her denial. Seeing them panic is the true confirmation of how screwed she is. It is a haunting reality of survival. Sometimes, seeing that raw, unfiltered fear in the eyes of total strangers warns you about your own doom way faster than your own gut feelings ever could. Everything finally clicks, hitting her like a massive freight train. Zoe is just a bookworm, but even she knows these giant red flags. The name Castellaneta, the heavy title of Don. This guy is straight up top-tier Mafia royalty, dripping in dark history. Suddenly, her fancy folder full of super rare historical papers feels like actual garbage compared to the threat of ending up in a ditch. Her voice totally cracks as she drops a pathetic whisper, just begging him to let her go. Meanwhile, his giant muscle guy drops to one knee, picking up her scattered papers with this creepy, delicate precision. Seeing a professional hitman handle old paper like fragile glass is insanely disturbing. It is crazy how life works. The shiny things we care about the most instantly become totally worthless the second our actual survival is on the line. The sheer arrogance of this dude's power is actually insane. He honestly does not even blink when she begs to leave. It is like a ghost was talking to him. Instead, he casually orders the entire floor to be cleared out. He claims a luxury suite like he personally owns the oxygen in the hotel. Without even looking down, he tells his right-hand man, Vincenzo, to grab her velvet folder. Vincenzo bags her entire life's work with the dead, robotic focus of a hitman loading up for a job. He does not care about her history obsession. He is just locking down an asset. Boom. Just like that, her whole identity is snatched. It is a really unsettling life lesson. People with actual, terrifying power never have to lift a single finger to destroy your world. They just give an order to the universe, and the universe totally obeys. You and I have seen this exact kind of tragic setup before, right? The total panic of someone who knows they are trapped. You actually feel bad for her as she scrambles for an exit that doesn't exist. She starts spitting out these painfully obvious lies about having a strict boss and messing up a delivery, clawing onto the last bits of her normal life. She throws on this fake tough girl armor, acting brave while she is totally breaking down on the inside. In one last tragic push, she promises to just evaporate. She swears she will take the back stairs, forget she ever saw him, and vanish off the map entirely. It is such a universal, human flaw. When we are backed right up against the edge of a cliff, we always try to negotiate with the hurricane, completely forgetting that the storm doesn't care about our rules. He just stands there and lets her completely exhaust herself against his brick wall of silence. Bro is perfectly still, soaking up her frantic lies with the creepy patience of a predator, waiting for its dinner to get tired. When she finally runs out of breath, he locks those dead eyes right onto hers. She tries using basic logic, crying about how the lame stalker downstairs isn't a threat to his Mafia empire. But Giorgio effortlessly takes her cute little worldview and stomps it into the dirt. He casually drops the timeline of her downfall with robotic precision. 2 hours to pull her name, 4 hours to track every single detail of her life. It is a massive wake-up call for everyone. Your clever logic and smart plans mean absolutely nothing when you are standing in front of the guy who personally owns the entire board. Let's look at this piece by piece, shall we? This guy is tightening the psychological vice grip, bleeding the hope out of the room. With a voice like silk and gravel, he maps out the brutal math of her end. Look at this! In 6 hours, the stalker sells her to the wolves. In 8, she ceases to exist entirely. Unless she accepts his protection, of course. The sick irony is insane. The savior extending his hand is the exact monster she should be sprinting away from. Here's lies tragic birth of a massive trauma bond. She offers a weak protest, but the words dissolve. He calculates the exact second her knees will hit the floor. The life lesson here is simple but harsh. Sometimes our ultimate destroyers wear the comforting mask of our only salvation. We have finally reached the jagged edge of no return. He stares down at her trembling frame with the cold expertise of a man who has broken 1,000 souls. He knows exactly how many heartbeats she has left. Dropping his voice to an icy whisper, he reminds her of the fatal truth she reached for him. Then he simply dictates where she will stand. It is in this precise shadow that her mind splinters. Beneath the terror, a dark corner of her psychology actually thrills at being consumed. She loathes herself for the sensation, weeping as her own biology betrays her in real time. The grandest tragedy leaves us with a quiet lesson today. The most lethal monsters do not need to build our cages. They merely hand us the iron, and we forge the locks ourselves. Stick with me here, because we need to look closely at Zoe. The camera lingers on her face as her life is silently hijacked. The most terrifying part of this frame is the complete absence of screaming. The capo sits there, playing the mastermind to perfection, stealing her freedom without ever raising his voice. He calmly dictates a totally fabricated story about her being sick. You can physically see Zoe trying to fight back, but the weight of the trauma paralyzes her throat. The room is brutally, suffocatingly quiet. This brings us to a simple truth we must understand about people like him. It is a vital life lesson about power. The most dangerous predators in this world do not ever need to yell to make you obey. They just speak softly and let your own terror do all the heavy lifting. Look at the heavy shadows in this scene as Zoe asks where they are going. Her voice is nothing more than a shattered whisper. She steps into the car simply because a narcissist spent 5 seconds orchestrating her surrender. Giorgio sits beside her, casually checking his expensive watch, as if he is waiting for a train, not kidnapping a woman. He names a hidden location where her boss cannot reach them. It takes a full city block for Zoe to process what he just said, and another block for the pure horror to wash over her face. She never once mentioned her boss's last name, yet this mobster already knew it. The hard life lesson we can take from this twist is chilling but necessary. Silence will never protect you from the predators who already live comfortably in the dark. Notice the framing of Giorgio sitting there, his hand resting casually on his knee. He stares out at the Paris streets as if he owns the pavement and every soul walking on it. Zoe asks 0 questions. It is heartbreaking to witness her body language. She regresses into a frightened 15-year-old girl, burying her panic deep inside. Her brain begs her to pack the trauma away just to survive the ride. The car rolls into an underground bunker, and Vincenzo opens her door. It looks like a polite gesture, but it is actually a heavy leash snapping tight. She follows them into a private elevator that shoots up to his penthouse as the iron gate slams shut behind them. The life lesson here is undeniable and grim. Politeness from a captor is nothing but a velvet-lined trap. The second those heavy elevator doors slide open, the vast penthouse simply swallows her alive. The acoustics in this space are truly terrifying. It is a suffocating kind of silence where, if you were to scream, the expensive walls would just absorb the sound. Giorgio sheds his coat, with a sickeningly normal domestic rhythm, acting as if they are returning home from a date. He points to a bedroom, instructing her to ask Vincenzo for whatever she needs. When she nervously questions what happens if she sneaks out, his face does not shift in anger at all. He just gives her the cold, infinitely patient stare of a ruthless prison warden. The life lesson we find here is deeply unsettling. True monsters do not lose their temper. They just calmly promise you a beautiful nightmare. The camera follows Zoe as she walks into her assigned room, perching on the edge of that massive bed. Notice what she refuses to do in this moment. She does not shed a single tear. Crying is a luxury reserved for those who are safe, and she knows there are no locks on her door. Sleep is completely out of the question tonight. Her nervous system is utterly fried, locked into a harsh survival mode. Instead, she spends her first night listening to the breathing of the house. She times Vincenzo's heavy boots, patrolling the hallway every 40 minutes flat. By 2 a.m, she maps out every distant sound. The brutal life lesson here is crystal clear. When your safety is violently ripped away, your brain will turn your own fear into a weapon, just to keep you breathing. This sequence is painfully gripping to watch. It is only the second morning. It is only morning, and the trauma bonding is already sinking its teeth into her mind. She discovers fresh coffee and a handwritten note from the boss, warning her not to open the door for anyone. His penmanship is elegant, completely masking the ruthless psychopath underneath. And what is her reaction? She carefully folds the note and hides it in her pocket. In this dark moment, that piece of paper is the only physical proof she still exists. It is a bitter truth to accept, but here is the life lesson we must all swallow. When a person is pushed to the absolute edge of despair, they will cling to the hand that locked the cage just to feel a human pulse. That very night, she cracks her door open, and Vincenzo is waiting. The shadows lengthen as Vincenzo slowly looks up from his Italian newspaper. He does not offer a single word, because when you hold absolute power, shouting is unnecessary. His dead stare communicates everything she needs to know. She can walk out, but he will follow, and Giorgio will know. Defeated, she shuts the door and retreats to her room. She pulls a tiny notebook from her bag. Once used for harmless memories, it is now her desperate survival manual. She begins charting out the blind spots and hallway lengths. The saddest part of this visual is the life lesson it leaves us with. She is not planning a cinematic escape. When the walls close in on us, our very first instinct is rarely to fight. It is usually just learning how to survive inside the corners of the cage. It is day 3. and Vittorio steps into the frame bearing unexpected gifts. You and I need to pause and unpack this psychological trap together. He hands her expensive shopping bags, yet he never orders her to wear the garments. A common thug would simply yell at her to put them on. But Vittorio is playing a masterful game of chess. He casually mentions her clothes will not last the week, twisting his control to sound like a practical favor. And Luca? She is already studying his expression, the way she used to study antique books, reading his dark moods just to stay safe. The life lesson here is one we all need to remember. When someone truly wants to own your life, the trap never looks like a rusty iron cage. It usually looks exactly like a perfectly tailored safety net. The tension peaks when Luca finally asks when this nightmare will end. Vittorio does not raise his voice. He flatly states that it ends only when he decides it ends. He delivers the line not like a villain, but like a man reading the morning weather report. Left alone, she opens the bags to find no pretty dresses. Instead, she finds practical, dark clothing designed to let her move quietly. The visual message is painfully clear. She is not a trophy. She is a pet learning to survive his penthouse. The cavernous size of the place is driving her mad. She memorizes how the sunlight crawls across the rug just to feel grounded. The life lesson here is absolute. You can dress a prison up in imported marble and fine leather, but a cage is still a cage if you cannot leave. Through the lens, you can feel Luca's frantic hypervigilance crawling right out of the screen. Those towering ceilings reduce her to a ghost, making the massive windows feel like a cruel joke. The opulent library feels as sterile as a hospital waiting room, reeking of harsh cleaners and cold leather. She looks like a discarded coat shoved into the back of a closet. But human beings are incredibly stubborn creatures. Stripped of her freedom, she decides to control the math. She tracks every single movement Vincenzo makes. 40 minutes on the dot, every single time, logged diligently into her notebook. The life lesson here reveals the raw power of the mind. Strip a person of their basic freedom, and their brain will instantly turn pure terror into cold, calculated data just to survive. Listen up, because the psychology here is absolutely wild. Luca tries to outplay the masterminds by calling her boss, Madame Aureli, hitting her with a fake cough to sell a heavy flu. But Aureli is not some clueless NPC. She is a total shark. She immediately knows this sick act is pure garbage. Instead of calling Luca out, Aureli just drops a sarcastic joke about the flu-loving luxury hotels. It is a massive missed connection, and honestly, it hurts to watch. You and I are going to unpack this together, because the life lesson is brutal. We always convince ourselves that our little lies are acting as a shield for our loved ones. But the cold truth? Those exact same lies are just the heavy bricks we use to build our own solitary confinement cells. The tension here is off the charts, guys. Madame Aureli refuses to push for details. She just tells Luca to hydrate and survive, basically her low-key way of saying she knows our girl is drowning in deep trouble. Luca hangs up instantly, fighting back serious tears. But watch her next move, because it is psychological genius. She blocks the maids from entering her room and scrubs her one single shirt in the bathroom sink. To a random bystander, this looks completely unhinged and pointless. But bro, it is a raw survival reflex. She just lost her entire universe, so she is conquering the sink. It is the most depressing victory ever, and the lesson hits hard. When the world strips away your control over the massive things, you will absolutely go to war over the smallest details, just to prove you still have a pulse. The vibe totally flips the second Vittorio crashes the scene. You can literally see Luca internally panicking, sitting barefoot and pretending to read to mask her absolute terror. His guy Vincenzo locks the hallway down tight. Then Vittorio walks in, rocking an open suit and rolled up sleeves, looking like he just finished hiding a body. He drops a smooth good evening, holding a weird little box. And Luca? She claps back, sarcastically calling him out by his Mafia title. Vittorio just smirks at her foolishness and tells her to open the box. The lesson here is a massive reality check. Sarcasm is absolutely not the same thing as bravery. When we get shoved into a corner with zero power, we just throw out edgy words to trick ourselves into thinking we still have teeth. Let us pause and look at this completely toxic dynamic together. Luca actually thinks she holds the power here, asking if this rare manuscript is a gift or a threat. But watch Vittorio completely flip the script. His voice drops super low, turning the word request into a total threat. Inside that box is the exact book she casually mentioned days ago. He did not just hear her, he downloaded her personality to use as a weapon. Look at his eyes. There is zero romance happening here. It is just the ice-cold patience of an apex predator waiting for the trap to snap shut. It is beautifully twisted, and here is a brutal truth. When somebody hands you the exact thing you have been begging the universe for, always ask what piece of your soul they are going to charge you for it. This scene is straight up agonizing to watch. Luca desperately tries to snatch back some control, her voice shaking while she compares this literal mob boss to the snobby art geeks back at her old job. She actually has the guts to ask if he bribes every girl he kisses with old books, thinking she just dropped a massive mic. But check out the subtle flex in Vittorio's jaw. He gives her this terrifying smirk and leans in, sucking all the air right out of the room. She honestly thought she was putting up a massive shield, but she just handed the villain the exact cheat code to ruin her. We all have to learn this painful lesson. Faking confidence in front of a real monster never actually makes them back down. It honestly just seasons the meat perfectly right before they move in for the final kill. This is where the sheer irony of the situation totally breaks you. Vittorio points right at her chest. She is verbally rejecting his gift, but her hands are literally gripping that vintage book like her life depends on it. She mumbles these weak excuses, acting like it is just about the art. He totally lets her play make-believe, knowing it just locks her deeper into his trap. Then the vibe goes freezing cold. He tells her to throw on a black dress and casually drops the Marchetti family name. He literally invents this massive crisis about a rival mafia hunting her down, gaslighting her into absolute terror. The tragedy here leaves us with a brutal life lesson. Shared trauma, even when it is totally fake and created by the person hurting you, bonds you to them way faster than happiness ever could. Watch how next level this psychological manipulation gets, guys. He whispers that the whole underworld is watching them now. She has to act like she belongs to him just to stay breathing. Feeling totally insulted, she snaps that she is basically just a prop. Then he drops the ultimate mind game, softly calling her his shield instead. It is pure emotional warfare. He makes her feel super special and protected, completely hiding the toxic fact that shields are literally built to get destroyed. She gives up, putting on the dark dress, but keeping her nerdy glasses as a tiny middle finger to his authority. Meanwhile, he just stares out the window like a statue. The lesson here is pure chills. The quietest dude in the room is always the biggest threat. You never have to bark when you literally own the dog pound. Step into this penthouse scene with me and feel the absolute suffocation. Vittorio is giving off this insane, terrifying stillness that only top-tier villains have. Luca finally says she is ready to go, but Vittorio purposely waits one intensely long second before even looking at her. It is such a toxic power move, literally training her brain to crave his attention. They roll out in a fully armored tank of a car, cruising through streets that his money basically bought. They pull up to this creepy restaurant to meet the markety boss lady, who is dripping in Mafia blood diamonds. Luca is completely clueless that she just walked into a death match. Keep this heavy truth in mind. The second you agree to play on someone else's rigged chessboard, you stop being a person and become a disposable pawn. The camera zooms in as the Mafia grandma instantly chooses violence. She flips languages mid-sentence, which is a total trap designed to make Luca crack. But our girl actually holds her ground, trying so hard to look like a boss. And that is the worst part. Underneath all her panic, she secretly wants to impress Vittorio. Next to them is Tommaso, acting frail but tracking every single breath Luca takes. Vittorio already hyped him up as a massive threat. Tommaso leans in, playing the sweet old grandpa routine, faking a hearing problem just to mess with her. Do not fall for the cozy vibe for a second, guys. The lesson here is written in stone. We constantly confuse good manners with actual kindness, but in the criminal underworld, being polite is just another way for a predator to pick your lock. Tommaso is absolutely crushing this innocent grandpa act. But look at the pure panic hiding in Luca's eyes. Before she even speaks, she checks Vittorio's reaction, like a compass. She spots his knuckles going pure white around his glass, and she instantly freezes up. It is so messed up. Her entire nervous system is totally hacked by this mafia boss. She gently repeats her name, treating Tommaso like a sweet old guy. Then out of nowhere, the matriarch bursts into laughter, cutting the tension, and actually asks Luca about restoring old books. You guys, Luca literally lights up like a supernova. She finally thinks she is in safe territory. It is honestly gut-wrenching to watch her fall for it. The life lesson here is rough. People are so desperate for a little bit of validation that we will literally bond with the exact same villains who are digging our graves. Let us take a second to appreciate the insane irony happening at this dinner table. Luca grabs a napkin, geeking out and passionately showing off ancient stitching methods. She literally has the most dangerous woman in the city, hooked on a story about old paint. But bruh, she is totally clueless about the bear trap snapping shut right on her ankle. The camera slides over to Vittorio. He is not even eating anymore. He is just crunching the numbers on how much cash her genius brain can make for his syndicate. Right next to him, Tommaso is silently taking mental screenshots of all her weak spots. She actually thinks she is dominating this dinner. The absolute hardest truth you will ever face is this. The exact millisecond you finally drop your walls and feel cozy inside the villain's house, that is when they figure out the way to shatter you. The alarm bells in her head are screaming right now, but Luca keeps hitting the snooze button. She suddenly realizes she never once brought up her old college during dinner. But when the mob boss lady mentioned it, Vittorio did not even blink. The guy already dug up every single secret from her past before they ever shook hands. The car ride home is just suffocating. Out of nowhere, Vittorio tosses her this tiny, calculated little compliment, just saying she did a good job tonight. The sheer relief that floods her face is absolutely devastating to witness. She has zero clue that she is already drowning in a massive nightmare. This whole mess leaves us with one seriously bitter lesson. Sometimes the exact people who promise to protect you from the dangerous wolves are literally just wolves themselves, hiding inside a ridiculously expensive suit. Yo, guys, we have got to talk about this insane psychological warfare right here. Vittorio is playing master-level chess in the dark of this car. He literally just lets his knuckles brush against Luca's, and her pulse goes absolutely wild. She is over here coping hard, blaming a bump in the road like a total clown. Bro, an apex predator like him does nothing by accident. Fast forward to her bedroom door, and the tension is thicker than concrete. He raises a hand, pauses a millimeter from her face, lets her fry in anticipation, and then just walks away. She completely collapses against the wood, gasping, realizing she actually wanted this toxic king inside. The life lesson? The worst prisons we ever get trapped in are never made of iron bars, but our own toxic desires. The absolute craziest plot twist here is that the Mafia does not even scare Luca anymore. Nope, it is her own thirsty cravings. A whole week melts away in this golden cage, and suddenly it is a soft Sunday morning. Vittorio steps out onto the balcony, ditching the boss suit for a casual white shirt with rolled-up sleeves. It is a flawlessly manufactured display of vulnerability. He is standing just close enough to bait her, but far enough to completely reject her. It is peak manipulation. The very dude who built her nightmare is now her only safe space. Here is a major life lesson we all need to wake up to. The real monsters in life rarely kick down your door looking like villains. They usually show up, looking fine on a balcony, waiting for you to walk right into their trap. This right here is the ultimate masterclass in control. Vittorio is just chilling by the railing and casually drops the word Philadelphia. Bro, Luca's blood literally turns to ice. She knows for a fact she never told this mobster where she grew up, but her brain is doing massive gymnastics to protect her fake peace, convincing herself she must have let it slip. The truth is way too terrifying. She completely breaks down, crying her eyes out, and hands him the keys to her trauma, spilling everything about her dad and that fatal crash. She literally handcuffs herself to him mentally. The brutal life lesson here? When we are desperately lonely and looking for a safe harbor, we usually hand our sharpest weapons right over to the exact people who are going to destroy us. Freeze the frame right here, because you and I need to unpack this insane manipulation. Vittorio does not offer a single word of comfort. No cheap apologies, nothing. Instead, he drops this suffocating, heavy silence that basically forces Luca to spill all her darkest secrets. She is bleeding out her grief, talking about her mom and those ruined Amalfi Coast dreams, while he just stands there, absorbing it all. By doing literally nothing, this absolute madman makes himself the only vault for her pain. A top-tier manipulator does not have to yell to own you. Here is a tragic life lesson for all of us to remember. Real empathy is supposed to help you carry your heavy bags, but weaponized silence is just someone measuring your wounds, to see where the knife goes in the easiest. Now let us switch cameras over to Zoe, who is sitting completely frozen, staring at Giorgio, the massive mob boss, holding her entire life in his hands. You think you have problems until you are stuck in the orbit of a guy like this. The dim room highlights his clenched jaw, radiating pure Mafia boss energy. But then, plot twist, he drops the tough guy act, flashes this perfect smile, and tells her to drink her tea, and guess what? She totally listens. He just casually steps out to the balcony, with the pink Paris sky behind him, acting like a ticking time bomb. The ultimate life lesson here is seriously depressing. It is wild how quickly we will surrender our hard boundaries to absolute monsters, just because they remember to smile and treat us to a simple cup of tea. Zoe is completely failing the vibe check in this room. She actually thinks Giorgio is just tired, totally missing the fact that she is a pawn on his twisted chessboard. After eating dinner all by her lonesome, she goes to sleep, hoping to forget Bastian, her toxic ishks. But surprise, trauma does not sleep. She wakes up thrashing around, terrified because she dreams Bastian is right there in her room. Before she can even catch her breath, the door cracks open, and Giorgio speaks from the pitch-black hallway. Absolute cinematic timing. The saddest life lesson we can take from this chaos is how often people trade one nightmare for a completely different one. We foolishly convince ourselves that a brand new, scarier shadow is somehow going to protect us from all the old ones. He hits her with the ultimate smooth line, asking if she wants company or silence. Stick with me on this point, guys, because this is exactly where the trap snaps shut. By giving her a fake multiple-choice question, he makes her feel like she has the power. She whispers silence, and he shuts the door, but the lock never clicks. Hours later, she sneaks across the freezing floor, presses her ear to the wood, and hears this absolute unit just breathing out there. He is literally guarding her door like a watchdog asking for nothing. She falls back into bed, totally hooked. Here is a tragic reality check for your life lesson. The exact second a dangerous person offers to be your shield, you will start writing a twisted romance in your head just to survive the dark reality. The sun comes up, and reality hits like a freight train. Zoe opens her door and finds a fresh glass of water and a perfectly folded handkerchief. Bro, this is not a romantic movie. This is a mafia boss perfectly calculating her emotional breakdown before it even happened. She stands there totally paralyzed, literally telling herself out loud that mobsters do not do this out of love. They do it to protect their shiny new investments. She repeats it 3 times like a magic spell to keep her sanity intact, but the lie is falling apart. She is catching feelings. The hardest life lesson you will ever have to face is that sometimes the only person treating you with absolute gentleness is the exact same person secretly engineering your total and complete destruction. Keep your eyes open. Later on, she wanders into the library and catches Giorgio changing his shirt. Boom! She sees this massive, jagged scar ripping across his shoulder. We are not talking about a neat hospital surgery. This is a sketchy bullet wound stitched up in a basement. Giorgio turns around, completely unbothered, radiating that icy boss energy. She stammers an apology, but he just buttons up his designer shirt, like he did not just expose his violent past. When she asks what happened, he drops the coldest line ever, saying it was just another life. He completely sweeps his trauma under the rug. This brings us to a fatal life lesson. As humans, we constantly fall for people hiding massive red flags and dark demons, totally convinced our love is the magical cure that will finally fix them. The tension here is off the charts. Giorgio pulls this agonizingly slow move, staring her down over his glasses. Zoe almost laughs because they are matching, but the vibe is way too lethal for jokes. He hits her with a dark, commanding voice, but our girl refuses to back down. She looks him dead in the eye and announces she is going back to work on a manuscript. Giorgio does not even blink and snaps back that Vincenzo is going with her as a shadow. She tries to argue she does not need a bodyguard for old books, but his face turns to solid stone. He coldly says she is not leaving without him. It is so tragic. She genuinely thinks she is having a powerful moment, fighting for her independence. The life lesson? Sometimes winning an argument just means you are negotiating your cage. Now we are at the peak of the episode, and we are going to break this down together. She is completely trapped. Giorgio has her pinned against these huge wooden bookshelves, and the energy is suffocating. He does this slow, predatory scan, checking her glasses, her lips, and locking onto her terrified eyes. She finally whispers her surrender. The room is so dead quiet. You can literally hear him breathing that rich Mafia scent of bergamot and danger. Then, in the ultimate flex, he raises his hand but does not even touch her. He just hovers his thumb in the air, tracing her jawline like a ghost. It is pure insanity. The life lesson here gives me absolute chills. The most terrifying form of control is the haunting promise that a toxic person can break you, but chooses to let you wait. Listen up, guys, because we are looking at an absolute masterclass in toxic mind games. Look at her, she is tilting her head up, completely defeated. Her body is waving the white flag. He closes the gap, pressing his forehead against hers for 3 whole seconds. His breath hits her shaking lip. He grabs her waist just to keep her from dropping. Then, he whispers one Italian word, perdona, forgive me, and just like that, he completely dips. The ice wall slams right back down. He casually says, Vincenzo will pick her up Wednesday at 7 in the morning. This is peak manipulator behavior. They pull you in close, just to leave you freezing. Here is a simple lesson for you. Someone who only holds you to keep you off balance doesn't care about your heart. They just want control. Watch her bolt from that library like her life depends on it. She is desperate to outrun her own nervous system. She storms the hallway, slams her door, and presses her face against the cold wood. In her head, she screams to snap out of this wild romantic delusion. He does not want you, she repeats. You are just an asset. Predators do not fall in love. She fights for her sanity, but the trap is set. Then, a low vibration hits the door. It is Giorgio. You can hear his heavy breathing as he leans against her last line of defense. It makes you realize a harsh truth. You can lie to your fragile mind all day just to survive. But when the bad is patiently waiting at your door, your heart is always the very first thing to cave. So you and I have to break down the mental warfare happening right here. Zoe knows the boss is lurking in the dark. She does not even need to see his shadow to feel the suffocating weight of him standing there. Look at that heavy brass doorknob shaking. It moves purely from the insane pressure of his thumb against the metal. But at this, he never actually turns it. He is just running a totally brutal mental siege on her. Finally, the heavy thud of his boots fades down the hall. 2 days go by under a miserable gray sky, and they avoid each other like ghosts. It teaches us something massive about human nature. The quietest moments in a toxic environment are always the absolute loudest. Silence is never empty space. It is the most brutal weapon anyone can ever use against you. Zoe is completely losing it, spiraling into a massive state of panic. She paces the floor, watching the armed mobsters outside. She times their patrol routes 3 times just to find one tiny blind spot, frantically scribbling an escape plan. She is paranoid this dark obsession is ruining her mind. Suddenly, the phone loudly rings. It is Madame Aurieli, begging her to appraise a rare French book. Zoe hangs up and knows she has to run. But let us be real. She is not leaving because she loves old paper. She is fleeing the sick attachment she is building with a ruthless boss. It brings up a very powerful life lesson. Sometimes we run head first to a blazing fire, simply because we are deeply terrified of the twisted comfort we might actually find sitting in the dark. Picture the opening shot of a wild thriller. The moody lighting catches the damp skin of the boss right out of the shower. He stands there, with his coat open, dominating the room with the terrifying energy of a total narcissist. Zoe catches his dark reflection in the glass, and her confidence shatters. She brings up the Lisbon collector, purposely taking a job she knows will make him furious. He just coldly watches the rain hit the window. The quiet between them stretches out, loaded and absolutely lethal. It points to a very painful reality. We so often hold our breath for the exact people who would gladly watch us drown. Remember this simple fact today. You must never let a toxic person's raging storm dictate the weather inside your own soul. Let the camera pan out to the street, showing a fake illusion of safety. Vincenzo finally speaks. His voice is flat and heavy like a Mafia general prepping for war. Return before the streetlights turn on, he orders. She tries to act tough, reminding him she is a grown adult, but he cuts her down with a freezing, dead-eyed glare. You are my responsibility, he says. It sounds protective, but watch her jaw tighten. He is not keeping her safe. He is just building the bars of a prettier cage. She grabs her bag and speedwalks away, wanting to smell old books just to feel normal again. Here is the tragic reality check for all of us. A golden cage is still a prison. True freedom means absolutely nothing if you have to beg a toxic person to hand it to you. Outside the bookstore, the tension goes through the roof. Vincenzo paces the sidewalk, radiating pure mob enforcer paranoia. He parks his ride, facing the street and scans reflections, while dropping rapid Italian into his phone. Then, the camera locks onto the alley. A sketchy black sedan is idling in the shadows. Any normal person would panic, but watch her defense mechanism activate. She forces herself to look away, pretending it is just a parked car. We literally all do this. We ignore massive red flags because admitting the bad guy is nearby means our safe bubble pops. Here is the ultimate lesson. Turning your back on the dark shadow does not make the predator disappear. When your gut screams that a situation is wrong, you must trust your instincts and listen. Look at how she totally buries her head in the sand. That creepy black sedan outside? She convinces herself it is just normal Paris traffic. She walks into the quiet bookshop, wrapping herself in basic everyday stuff to cope. Aureli works the counter, complaining about a sore throat, which makes the scene feel painfully normal. The camera gets close as our girl traces the spine of an old Portuguese book. Her hands move on autopilot, building a mental fortress out of paper while a Mafia war brews on her front step. It is wild how we use our boring daily routines as a shield against our worst fears. But let me tell you a real truth. Staying busy is just a fake paper wall. It is never going to stop the cold, harsh reality that is waiting patiently outside your front door. For one beautiful second, the heavy tension drops. Aureli slides over a teacup, making a sarcastic joke about the hitman and his expensive shoes outside. It is the perfect comedy break to hide the dread sneaking up. The sunset fills the shop with gorgeous gold light, tricking your brain into thinking the bad guys left. Then, smack, the deadbolt violently snaps shut. Vincenzo barks a harsh order for her to step away from the glass. The golden hour is dead, swapped for the cold lighting of an absolute nightmare. It is a wild wake-up call. It reminds us that the moments where you feel the safest are often just the deep breath right before you go underwater. True peace is rare. Sometimes it is just a quick intermission before the real tragedy hits. The camera zooms in on her terrified face at the window. 3 mobsters rush the sidewalk, pulling back their coats to show cold steel. The trunk of their car is open like a grave waiting for a body. In a basic movie, the girl freezes up here. But watch her totally flip the script. She screams at Aurelie to lock the iron door, turning this quiet shop into a literal war zone. She throws her whole body against a massive oak bookcase. Suddenly, 20 years of heavy books crash down onto the attackers like an earthquake. It is a huge flex of pure survival instinct. It proves a vital point about life. When the wolves finally show up at your front door, playing the helpless victim guarantees you lose. To survive a true monster, you have to step up and become the avalanche yourself. The whole scene explodes into insane chaos. Splintered wood and broken glass fly everywhere, while Vincenzo screams frantic orders. Then, the danger gets way too close. A giant hand grabs her ribs and yanks her backward by the hair. But look at her face. The panic drops. She goes full feral mode. Channeling all her built-up rage, she sinks her teeth right into the hitman's wrist, like a trapped wolf. She tastes his blood. The dude screams and stumbles back, completely shocked that she fought back. It is nasty and brutal, but it works perfectly. It drops a heavy truth bomb on us about the real world. You can never peacefully negotiate with a toxic predator. Sometimes, your firm boundaries have to be violently carved in stone just to be fully respected. The goon freaks out and tosses her into the stone floor. Her skin scrapes against the bricks, her glasses shatter, and the camera goes blurry to show how wrecked she feels. Through this crazy haze, Vincenzo drops an attacker in 2 lightning-fast seconds. But then, the real final boss of this nightmare pulls up. Giorgio's car tears down the narrow street, breaking every law because his Mafia crew owns the city. Watch how this guy enters the chat. He does not sprint over to save her. He steps out of the ride, moving super slow, bringing the chilling energy of the Grim Reaper. It is a wild visual that proves one hard fact about life. Real, untouchable power never needs to run. It just takes its sweet time, fully knowing you have absolutely nowhere left to hide. Watch this closely, guys, because the framing here is just insane. Giorgio walks up to the shaking survivor, face completely deadpan, grabs his arm and snaps it backward. The crack is so loud it drowns out the police sirens, miles away. Then, crouching down with zero emotion, he speaks perfect French, telling this sobbing dude to deliver a message to his rival, Lefra. He literally turns a broken man into a bloody messenger pigeon. The camera pans, showing another attacker dead on the floor. For absolute menaces like Giorgio, violence is not a loss of control, it is their mother tongue. The life lesson here is simple. Never mistake a lack of emotion for peace, because sometimes a quiet demeanor hides the most terrifying storms. The craziest part about this whole bloodbath is the dead silence right after. No sirens flashing outside, no neighbors screaming, just a ruthlessly clean wrap-up. The girl is shaking, her adrenaline completely crashing, while Aurelie pulls her out of the wreckage and hypes her up to survive. Meanwhile, Giorgio is in the back, mumbling casual Italian, like he is ordering a coffee. Then, the Mafia boss steps up, face looking like carved marble, and gently wipes the blood off her lip. This right here is the ultimate trap, a total mind game being set up in real time. The life lesson we have to take away today is this: never let the devil play the hero, because trading 1 second of fake mercy will lock you into a lifetime of toxic chains. Stick with me here, because Aurelie is an absolute legend for this. This exhausted shop owner refuses to panic. She looks over the shattered glass, stares at the terrified girl, and drops one question: did you bite him? The girl nods, and boom, a silent pact is made. She fought back, so she is going to make it. Then Aurelie spins around to face the Mafia kingpin himself. Giorgio is standing in the rubble, suit completely wrecked, giving off major predator energy. But this lady does not even blink. They lock eyes in this epic, silent turf war. It is an amazing scene that drops a rock-solid life lesson. The most dangerous person in the room is never the one waving a weapon around. It is the person who stays completely calm while the whole world burns around them. Aurelie is completely immune to this mobster and his intimidating aura. Rocking the tone of a teacher, scold a bad kid, she demands to know if he dragged this chaos into her safe space. Giorgio just stands there in the shadows, silently pleading guilty. Unbothered, Aurelie straight up orders him to take care of the terrified girl. And insanely enough, the untouchable Mafia boss actually folds. He yields to a shopkeeper and sends his goons away. The scene aggressively cuts to his freezing, massive penthouse, where the girl is violently shivering under these intense, expensive lights. It is a brutal reality check, wrapped into a powerful life lesson. You can hide behind heavy steel doors and millions of dollars, but your physical body will never forget the raw terror of the dark. Back in the suffocating quiet of his apartment, she is totally zoned out, staring at her shaking hands like they belong to someone else. Giorgio waves off his guards, locking them inside this giant glass vault. Then, he creeps up like a literal predator and drops to his knees in a flawless, totally manufactured display of vulnerability. The camera zooms in tight, and here is the massive plot twist. She actually denies him. Instead of falling for the trap, she recoils, pushing her back deep into the sofa to dodge his touch. Her polite filter drops completely. She looks him dead in the face and says he is not a good man. This is a massive win that hands us a top-tier life lesson. The exact second you refuse a fake, manipulative apology is the moment you finally take your power back. Pay attention to the lighting here, guys. Sharp shadows cut across her shaking shoulders as she throws the ugly truth right back in his face. She forces him to remember the sickening crunch of that guy cracking his arm, completely refusing to let him romanticize his savage mobster lifestyle. She lays out a decade of surviving absolute misery, proving her trauma taught her exactly how violent men operate, but Giorgio does not flinch. Instead, this guy weaponizes his own surrender. He stays planted on his knees, talking in this creepy, calm voice, swearing he will stay glued to the floor until she tells him to get up. Giving her a fake sense of control is just his way of locking the cage. It leaves us with a chilling life lesson. Sometimes, the deadliest traps look exactly like wide-open doors. The camera really hangs on her hands while her brain is just short-circuiting. Literally minutes ago, she was strong enough to make a killer bleed, but now she is shaking, looking at this scary dude playing the victim. Her anger twists into something way more dangerous, and she breathlessly whispers for him to stay. You and I both know this is a bad move. Giorgio stays frozen on the rug, his expensive suit still stained with the actual proof of his violent nature. Very slowly, he takes off her broken glasses so she has to look at him with zero protection, and quietly asks if he can touch her. This is a brutal scene that delivers a crucial life lesson. The moment a monster stops demanding things and politely asks for permission, we let our guard down and drop our swords. The tragedy hits exactly how we feared it would. She caves in without throwing a single punch, and watching her shoulders slump in defeat is honestly heartbreaking. But we really cannot blame her. When you spend your entire life dodging fists, a gentle touch feels like absolute magic, even if those same hands just ruined someone else. She gives him this slow nod, and in one agonizing split second, their twisted dynamic is locked in forever. He did not have to break her walls down by force. He just waited until she handed him the keys herself. It is a cray-sad look at human weakness that gives us a heavy life lesson. When you are suffering from extreme emotional exhaustion, you will settle for any form of peace, no matter how ridiculously toxic the source might be. The camera shifts focus to her completely fractured mindset. She stares down at Giorgio, who is still kneeling there, while another guy, spilling blood, literally ruins his expensive silk shirt. He throws out this highly calculated apology, playing the vulnerable card like he is aiming for an Oscar. She hits back with an empty voice, listing all the years her past abuser wrecked her mind without ever throwing a punch. But then she drops a wild admission. No guy has ever actually used violence just to protect her before. Boom. That is where the deep roots of a trauma bond permanently lock in. It delivers a really tragic life lesson for us today. Leaving our deepest emotional wounds completely unhealed leaves us so desperate for a protector that we will gladly walk into the arms of a predator. She actually reaches out and presses her shaking fingers against his wrist. Feeling his totally calm pulse is honestly terrifying because it proves this crazy violence is just a normal Tuesday for him. Her exhausted brain starts making up excuses for his brutality, desperately trying to convince herself that his rampage was some dark night chivalry. We are watching a victim literally rebrand a villain into a savior. Giorgio softly says she owes him absolutely nothing, which is an evil little trick to make her feel indebted forever. She fully gives up, leaning her forehead against his, while his hand grabs the back of her neck to claim his turf. There is a massive life lesson echoing in this mess. We often make the fatal mistake of confusing a temporary break from pain with actual, lasting safety. Notice how this massive luxury penthouse suddenly feels like a tiny, suffocating box. The psychological trap finally snaps shut on her brain. Giorgio takes the lead, perfectly using her hesitation against her. He claims she deserves to know his true identity, wrapping his Mafia confession in this fake emotional vulnerability. Still kneeling on the floor, he uses physical surrender to hide the fact that he is pulling every single string. He casually drops the bomb that he has been running a massive crime syndicate since he was 28. He feeds her these tiny truths to keep her blind to the massive red flags. By pointing out her trembling hands, he plays the merciful king. The life lesson here is crucial. Manipulators will always trade you a warm, comforting lie to steal away your reality. Let us pause right on this frame together, guys, because this is the exact second the lock clicks. Giorgio literally invents a brand new threat just so he can keep playing the hero, swearing on his facial scar to protect her. It is pure theatrical garbage meant to destroy her independence. When she asks why he even cares, her voice is shaking, completely starved for some warmth. He flashes this icy smirk and says it is because she threw herself at his mercy. She is so deeply broken that she totally misses the giant red flag, twisting his mobster cruelty into this holy romantic vow. It hurts to watch, but it leaves us with an unforgettable life lesson. When someone is stripped for just a drop of safety, they will look directly at the iron bars of a cell and call it a loving embrace. Look at this absolute madness, guys. Watch her body language as she reaches out to him first. She is literally trying to pacify a walking red flag. Giorgio just takes her hand, sealing this dark, twisted deal without saying a single word. She touches his jaw, feeling that rough stubble, and in one breath, her entire survival instinct just goes out the window. She whispers that she knows he is lying, but her voice is completely dead. This guy does not even flinch. He is a stone-cold mafia boss, and she is using his pretty face to excuse the absolute demon hiding underneath. The lesson here is pretty heavy. People who are completely terrified will almost always choose a beautiful, comforting lie over a cold and brutal reality. We need to pause and break this down. By ignoring the massive warning signs, Zoe is basically handing the Dawn the exact tools to build her own cage. Giorgio lets out this fake little sigh, pretending to be vulnerable, so she feels like the main character who can save him. But when they kiss, bro, look at the screen. Zero warmth. It is entirely calculated to break her defenses. His hand on her neck looks like love, but it is pure ownership. He is mapping out the territory she just handed over, and she is letting him take it all. It is wild to watch. Here is a grim life lesson for you. The absolute best way to completely control someone is to manipulate them into thinking give up their freedom was their own idea. This is the exact frame where her freedom gets totally deleted. The camera zooms in as Giorgio pulls back, locking those dark, dead eyes onto hers. She does not even have her glasses to hide behind anymore. He gives one quiet order for her to follow him, and her hand is literally shaking as he grips it. He leads her down the exact hallway she spent weeks trying to memorize, and now she is just surrendering. He hits the light switch with his shoulder, and boom, pitch black. Cut to the next morning, soft sunlight, white sheets, and fake peace. You and I both know this is a total trap. The hardest truth to swallow in life is that our own minds will happily decorate a prison cell just to avoid admitting we are locked up. Now the camera catches Zoe waking up, and the vibe is incredibly heavy. His dark shirt on the chair and her glasses perfectly folded on the nightstand scream that a control freak was here. Through the wall, she hears his deep voice snapping ruthless orders in Italian. Any normal person would realize they are sleeping inside a mobster's fortress. But guess what? A crazy smile actually spreads across her face. After 10 years of running, she finally slept peacefully. She thinks she is safe just because the biggest predator in the room is hugging her. That is completely insane. It reveals a super uncomfortable truth. A broken person will gladly hug a ticking time bomb if it means they can finally stop running from their past. Check out her posture in this shot. She shrinks down like a scared little kid, totally exposing that unresolved trauma. That makes her the absolute perfect target for a fake hero. She is rubbing her arms, totally lost, when the door smoothly swings open. In walks Giorgio with fresh coffee, looking like he just stepped out of a romance movie. Dark pants, loose shirt, wet hair. It is a flawless disguise, completely scrubbing away the fact that he probably just ordered a hit on someone. It is wild how easily he plays the domestic boyfriend. We have to remember a super basic life lesson here. True danger does not always kick down your door with a weapon. Sometimes, it walks right in with a charming smile and your favorite drink. Hold up, freeze the video right here. Look at Giorgio standing in the shadows, playing the ultimate manipulator. He is making Zoe feel so incredibly special. He hands her the coffee, and it has the exact, specific amount of cream she likes. When she asks how he knew, his answer should make her sprint for the fire escape. He flat out admits he watched her for days. He stalked. You and I are going to unpack this madness together. Look at the camera lingering on that rare book. Giorgio uses it as a physical apology, a massive anchor of manipulation, and Zoe takes it like a sacred gift. It is agonizing watching him smoothly overwrite her reality. He drops his voice, talking about erasing her schedule, and boom, she blindly hands over her freedom. He brings up Bastian, claiming he neutralized the threat. He spins this twisted fairy tale of being her noble shield, totally hiding that he is the actual monster in the room. The devotion in her eyes is the real tragedy. There is a brutal lesson for us all here. When your soul is starved for safety, you will happily warm your hands on the very fire that is burning your world to the ground. Giorgio whispers for her to get some rest, playing her like a puppet in this twisted drama. Gasping for normal air, Zoe forces a fragile joke about avoiding marriage to slice through the suffocating tension. The dawn just hits her with a dark, shadow-soaked smile. He humors her, agreeing to hold off on the wedding to give her the pathetic illusion that she still has boundaries. His voice is smooth as glass, claiming he only makes small promises because he actually keeps them. It is a terrifying masterclass in fake humility. Drowning in this manufactured safety bubble, she leans in and kisses his shoulder. Remember this haunting life lesson. Trust built in the shadow of complete terror is never real trust. It is just a desperate heart doing whatever it takes to survive the night. He breathes her in like he owns the very oxygen she exhales. The scene hard cuts to the freezing marble of the penthouse kitchen. Zoe wanders in wearing his oversized dress shirt, swallowed entirely by his identity. Giorgio follows like a silent predator, dropping a heavy, possessive hand onto her waist. The speed of his ownership is terrifying, yet to Zoe, it feels like a warm embrace. Over in the corner, Vincent, the brutal Mafia enforcer, is casually reading a morning paper. The visual contrast is totally absurd. Barefoot and fragile, Zoe is happily playing house inside a fortified crime compound. Let this be a painful reminder. Normalizing the abnormal is a highly dangerous game. It slowly blinds your survival instincts until you are comfortably sleeping inside a tiger cage. Look across this crazy room. Vincenzo lifts his gaze, wearing a dead-eyed mask, He formally addresses Giorgio as the Don, a cold reminder of the blood on their hands. Giorgio fires back in rapid Italian, sounding perfectly relaxed like it is nothing. Zoe understands none of it, yet she happily soaks in the morning light. Vincenzo shoots her a tiny smile, wishes her good morning in French, and points to the fresh bread. Then comes a sound that will literally break your heart. Zoe actually laughs. It is a breathless, genuine sound of pure joy. She is completely assimilated, finding true comfort among hitmen who could destroy her in a heartbeat. Here is a haunting realization for you to remember. The darkest places on Earth can easily construct the most beautiful illusions of a safe home. Watch her sitting in the sunlight, treating this Mafia penthouse like a sanctuary. She hugs his shirt tightly, hiding inside the monster's shadow to feel safe. Giorgio leans nearby, radiating manufactured domestic peace. But then the camera pushes in tight on her eyes, and boom, the grand illusion cracks wide open. Her mind violently flashes back to that claustrophobic elevator ride on their first day. Before she ever mentioned her stalker, Giorgio calmly spoke Bastien Lev's full name. He already knew the target. The Don orchestrated the entire threat from day one. It is agonizing watching her realize she was a pawn this whole time. Stick with me, because we all know this pain. Our fragile minds will desperately bury the most terrifying red flags just to keep an exhausted heart from shattering completely. Study her silent grief right here. She slowly lowers her coffee, her gaze burning a hole into the side of Giorgio's face. He plays the ultimate protector flawlessly, tracing hypnotic circles on her back to cement their twisted trauma bond. For 2 agonizing seconds, the horrifying truth that orchestrated her misery burns on her tongue. Yet she swallows the words. We are literally screaming at the screen, begging her to run. Why does she stay quiet? Because for the first time, she feels happy. To a broken soul, sudden happiness is deeply terrifying because it gives you something to lose. She locks the betrayal away in a mental vault. We all make this tragic mistake, choosing a beautiful lie over a brutal reality. Always remember this simple lesson, guys. The human body keeps the score, and it will never truly forgive a forced deception. Look at this train wreck. She takes the massive red flag and shoves it deep into the back of her mind. It looks like pure domestic bliss, but inside she is drowning in an exhausting sea of panic. Giorgio has the dark, predatory instincts of a veteran sociopath. He literally feels the microscopic shift in her breathing, turns his head, and asks if everything is cool. Boom. It is a lethal pop quiz testing her loyalty. She lies straight to his face, sealing her doom by pressing a sweet kiss to his shoulder. He rewards her with a kiss on her hair. Classic mind games, flawlessly executed before breakfast. Honestly, this whole bitter scene gives us a massive reality check. True safety can never exist in the arms of someone you have to carefully manage just to survive the day. Stick with me, because the second act is where the trap finally snaps shut. 3 weeks of quiet routine was all it took for her to drop her guard. She drank the coffee he poured and let him soothe her fears, actually believing this guy was her savior. But here is the brutal reality check. Controlling people do not rescue broken souls. They collect them, hoarding them like stolen art. The man she thought was her safe harbor was the exact storm she should have sprinted away from. It hurts to watch her sink into this carefully crafted lie. Still, it leaves us with a solid lesson. The most dangerous cage in the world is never made of cold iron bars. It is built from comforting words and warm blankets, making you forget you even need to escape. Her reality shatters when one piece of paper nukes her denial. A photo slips out of the book he gave her. Picture the camera zooming in. It is Zoe at 16, smiling at graduation. But wait, lingering in the blurred background is a younger Giorgio. My jaw dropped. He had been tracking his prize for years. The handwritten words on the back are a sickening promise of her eternal debt to him. Her hands turn to ice. You can feel her heart giving out under the crushing weight of this insane betrayal. The romantic fairy tale instantly burns to ash, leaving only pure terror. It brings us to a deeply human truth we must never forget. You can never truly heal your broken soul in the exact same toxic soil that caused you to bleed in the first place.
The deepest lesson from Zoe S. journey is that survival depends not only on escaping danger, but on having the courage to ask difficult questions. Throughout the story, Zoe notices details that do not fully make sense. Giorgio Bastian's full name before she says it. He seems to know things about her past, and his protection appears too prepared to be accidental. At first, she stores these questions silently, the way she stores escape routes and patrol times in her notebook. This habit shows both fear and intelligence. She has survived by observing before acting. However, the story's ending suggests that the question she avoided may be the one that matters most. Giorgio was watching her long before the elevator, Zoe must confront the painful possibility that her rescue was part of a larger plan. Educationally, this is a strong lesson about self-protection. When something feels, even inside a situation that also feels comforting, we should not bury the question forever. Fear may tell us to stay quiet because the answer could destroy the safety we have found. But silence can become another cage. Zoe's strength lies in her awareness. She may be frightened, attracted, confused, and emotionally vulnerable, but she is not blind. She notices. She keeps the question whole. For viewers, this teaches the importance of trusting one's inner alarm. Healing from a manipulation requires more than accepting kindness. It requires demanding truth. A person who has been controlled before must learn that their questions are valid. Zoe's story reminds us that reclaiming yourself means refusing to abandon your own perception, even when your heart wants boys to believe the easier version. Freedom begins when you stop being afraid to ask, what is really happening to me?